We bet you've seen one of these still cruising the highway recently. Oh, and if you're wondering where your beloved Ford F-150 or other truck is, note that we skipped traditional trucks altogether. Trucks are supposed to last forever. Mercedes 240D. If you wanted a Mercedes in the 1980s that got reasonable mileage, that is, above 20 miles per gallon, you got a diesel. That the company sold as many as it did was largely a fluke of federal regulations. The thrifty diesels allowed Mercedes to meet fleet fuel economy standards. They also were built to run forever, with not a single bit of electronics needed under the hood. These cars are like a rocking chair made out of hickory, says Mitch Carr, who's been working on these models in his Kensington, MD, shop since 1986. Once you get it started, you could throw out the battery and it would keep running. There's nothing to go wrong. Generally garaged and carefully serviced by their original buyers, many of these are now with their second or third owner. They're popular among tinkerers, especially those who like to convert them to run on recycled vegetable oil. Mercedes was one of the few manufacturers that continued selling diesels after this golden era of the diesel. Those sales were minimal when gas was cheap. The core reliability of a diesel engine remains the same in these later models, but the later Benzes suffered the same software teething problems of their gasoline-powered counterparts in the late 1990s and 2000s. Toyota Camry. The 1992 model year marked the point where the Camry really hit its stride and went on to become a sales and endurance leader. Two reasons: the styling, which evoked Toyota's then new Lexus luxury line, and roominess. Camrys that Toyota had imported to the States up until then had hewed to a Japanese market restriction of being no more than 67 inches wide. For 1992, Toyota decided to build a separate model just for the North American and Australian markets that was 70 inches wide. In so doing, it created a competitor to the 71-inch wide Ford Taurus, which it would go on to dethrone as the most popular sedan in the U.S. in 1997. It's held that honor for all but 1 year since. Many, if not most, of those millions sold are still around. You see them going 200,000, 300,000 miles all the time, says Tom Torbjornsen, author of How to Make Your Car Last Forever. They're just very well made. Note that some of the recent black eyes the Camry, and Toyota generally, received over sticking gas pedal issues have nothing to do with the car's long-term durability. A group of Lexus models share the Camry's roots and durability, but with plusher accommodations, the Lexus S300, 330, 350 and RX 300, 330, 350. Same story for the Toyota Avalon, essentially a stretched Camry. Ford Escort, transportation, nothing more. Reasonable reliability. Way cheaper on the used market than a Toyota of the same era. Virtually nobody gets excited about a Ford Escort, but for people who need a way to get to work for not a lot of dough, this is a prime mover. That's why it made a crowdsourced list of the 10 best cars for poor people on the car blog Jalopnik, which commented, "Everyone seemed to agree that Ford has turned out some very straightforward A to B automobiles that depreciation has made into solid bargain buys." The years we're discussing mark Ford's second bid at selling a model named Escort in the US. It's not to be mistaken for the first, sold from 1981 to 1990, which is best forgotten. The 1991 Escort represented one of Ford's more successful collaborations with Mazda, and it owes much of its design to the Mazda protege. The shared DNA can also be found in the Mercury Tracer and Ford ZX2. Chevy Camaro or Pontiac Firebird. These cars' refusal to die is not necessarily a function of inherent reliability. It's the sheer bullheadedness of their owners, aging children of the 60s and 70s, who still want to drive a two-door American sport coupe with a V8 and rear-wheel drive, and no way is it going to be a Mustang, because that would be a Ford. They can't afford a new Camaro, or other new, hot sport coupe offerings, such as the Dodge Challenger. And they can't afford pony cars from the actual muscle car era of the late 1960s and early 1970s, which are now only for well-heeled collectors. So that leaves the F-body cars, in conditions ranging from impeccably polished to primer gray. They're an aspirational ride of sorts, says Bob Merlis, creator of the blog Feral Cars, which tracks old and interesting, but not show quality, vehicles. People always preserve them. They're the "I'm going to get around to it" kind of car. They don't get crushed. Another factor in their favor, used parts are abundant, given how many of these were put into a ditch early in their lives due to youthful indiscretions. Ford Crown Victoria or Mercury Marquis. These road tanks have been doing a great job taking Granny and Grandpa to church every Sunday for decades. Even though the civilian versions lack the endurance building parts installed in police cruisers and taxi fleets, such as oil coolers and stronger suspensions. The core components of the American sedan are all there: V8 engine, solid rear axle, body-on-frame construction. The Chevy Caprice held this niche as well until the mid-1990s, when GM decided to turn its production facility over to big SUVs. A footnote: the MARQUIS went to the guillotine along with the entire Mercury brand with the 2011 model year, and most Crown Vic Autoria sales from 2008 onward of fleets. But the vehicles are plentiful in the used car marketplace, and as one fan put it on Jalopnik, replacement parts number in the billions and are bought for beans. If you're dead set on buying a former police car, there are even outfits that recondition them for sale to civilians. Buick LeSabre. Despite the best efforts of GM marketing departments to persuade car buyers otherwise, most people realized by the 1990s and 2000s that Buicks, Chevrolets, Pontiacs and Oldsmobiles were all very similar under the skin. And yet, it's the Buicks that got the love in this era, as reflected in the many awards the brand won from quality rankers J.D. Power and Associates. The LeSabre won Most Trouble-Free Domestic in 1990, and the brand as a whole was the top among domestics for initial quality. 15 years later, the LeSabre won Most Dependable Full-Size Car. There were more honors in between those years, and Buick continues to do well in these surveys. A reason these cars endure? Experts point to who is buying them: seniors. It's a great little old man car, they're not pushing them hard, and they're maintaining them well. If you need something cheap for point A to point B, you can't go wrong with these. Other Buicks, Centuries, Regals and Park Avenues also do quite well. As with many GM cars from that era that have V6 engines, watch out for leaky or degraded intake manifold gaskets, a potentially pricey fix. Jeep Cherokee. We're going to make an exception to our no trucks rule for the Jeep Cherokee. For one thing, it's not really a truck. As the first small crossover in the U.S., it did not have traditional body-on-frame construction of a traditional SUV. Despite that, and despite being the last gasp of the dying American Motors Corporation, it did have Jeep toughness in its DNA, excellent off-road abilities and a well-proven, durable, straight-six engine. Many Cherokees are still roaming America's secondary roads, and Europe as well, in a turbodiesel variant. There's a caveat, says Edmunds Drury. It will drive, he says, but is everything working? Probably not. A window might not go down, or a speaker might be out. For owners willing to put up with those sorts of niggling problems, or fix them themselves, the Jeep Cherokee can be an interesting combination of a vehicle that will go just about anywhere, and keep doing so for a long time. If you enjoyed this video, kindly press the like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe with notifications on, so that you don't miss out on videos like this. Thank you for watching.